Today I have this domed lampshade that has two broken pieces, and I'm going to show you how I repair them. Here's the couple of pieces that are down at the border, and I'm going to try and choose some glass. I have some peach color glass here. It doesn't really work too well. I happen to have an exact match for this border piece here. It's a Wismach, sort of a magenta and green. And then I happen to find also a piece of this lilac and white spectrum glass that is an exact match to the rest of this lampshade. So the first thing that I have to do is break this piece out. This seems like a very violent thing to do, and yes, I should be wearing gloves. You put a million score lines all over, just a whole bunch of score lines going all different directions. And what we're gonna try and do is we're gonna try and tap the glass on the back side. So this is gonna help to weaken that piece so that when we go to try and break it out, it will go a little easier. It'll chip out, ideally. And so now I'm gonna tap from the back side, and nothing's really happening too much. You have to kind of be really, really careful when you do this because you don't want to hit the wrong piece. I've done that a couple of times and then had to repair more pieces than I needed to. I'm coming in from the inside and I'm going to try and loosen some of these pieces here. Even if the glass isn't moving, there are cracks that are starting to develop more inside the glass so that when I go to break it out, it'll be a whole lot easier. Now I can go in with just combination pliers, reaching in and just grabbing onto any piece. You're gonna hear cracking and it's gonna feel a little weird if you've never done this before, and the glass is gonna fly all over the place, so make sure you're wearing eye protection. But the object is to remove all of this glass, or as much of it as possible, from the foil. So you can just grab onto it, you can chip it out. The pliers will help though, and you can just kind of wiggle the glass and it should come right out. So you just keep reaching in, and all of those score lines that you put in there are gonna help you. Now this last bit here, I just kind of have to take a little bit of a different approach. Now I'm gonna just kind of wiggle it and out it comes. I'm gonna get this last little bit. You could leave little chips in there for this next step. That's not a problem. I'm just removing it. This next piece here, I'm gonna go ahead and put the score lines in, but I'm not gonna break it out just yet because I wanna get an accurate shape for this border piece here before I break this piece out. I'm doing the exact same thing as I did before, just putting score lines in, sort of in a zigzag. That's what it looks like after I've scored it all. Now I'm going to try and just weaken it, even though I'm not going to break the piece out just yet. So I'm doing the same thing. When it's a smaller piece, you have to be just really careful just to have really good aim. I have it on a cushiony foam pad to sort of absorb some of the shock. This is what it looks like after I've got the score lines in. I'll break it out later. Now I've got it hanging off the edge of a table, and I'm gonna use some pliers and some flux, and I got my iron heated up. I have a fume extractor right above because we're gonna melt the foil from this first broken piece. Use a whole lot of flux because now you have to melt through all this extra polishing wax and then through old patina. So this is gonna smell really bad, and you can see all the smoke that's getting generated here. What I'm trying to find is a spot where I can wedge my iron and loosen an end of the foil so I can grab onto it with some pliers. So first, just melt as much of that old solder off of there between the pieces. And lots of flux. So you don't need any solder here, you just need your flux brush and your iron, and we keep brushing the flux on there. I can't emphasize this enough. Flux is your friend here. And you keep dragging this iron until something comes up, and you can start to see it come up right here. So now I'm gonna try and wedge my iron to lift it up so that I've got something to grab onto. This is ideal. And as you can see, there's a reinforcing wire at the very bottom, and that's gonna help us later. Now I grab onto this little end here, and I'm going to try and pry this other end so I'll have something to grab on later. There, it's coming loose. So now you just only pull very gently once you've seen that the solder has completely melted. So just watch what I'm doing here. I have a different video where I do another repair, and I call this sort of like unzipping the solder seam. More flux. And you'll notice that when you do this, if you're working through any of the old solder or old patina, it's going to smell really bad. So that's why fume extraction is really, really important, at least if you have good ventilation or a fan that's blowing outward. That will be helpful. We're not trying to disturb any of the foil from the outside pieces, the surrounding pieces, but we are just trying to remove just the foil from the broken piece. I'm not putting this on fast forward because I want you to see exactly what's happening. If you put this on a higher speed, I understand. But if you've never done this before, sometimes it's helpful to see the labor that goes behind removing the foil. And as you're doing this, it's going to get really messy. It's going to make a huge mess on the floor. And there's just a lot of extra solder that just has to get cleaned up as you're working. Sometimes you have to hold the iron in place because it really has to burn through that patina and that wax in order to get to the solder right below. If there are any gaps, that's helpful because that's something that you can wedge the iron into so that you can separate out that foil. Now I've got most of it gone. You just drag your iron all along the perimeter to just remove all the extra solder and make as much space for the new piece as possible. And of course, wipe off all that flux and all the dirt that gets accumulated. And that's what it looks like. And everything's still intact from the surrounding pieces. Now I'm making a new piece, and so all I do here is I'm just putting a piece of paper behind it and using a pencil to recreate the shape of the original piece. It's a little rough, and I've got a lot of different lines here, but you'll see what I'm trying to do here in just a second. So now I'm using regular scissors and I'm just cutting it out. But I'm trying to now match it with the empty space as well as the pieces around it. These mass-produced lampshades, all of these border pieces are exactly the same when they construct them. So I'm trying to match it as best as I can. So I'm just kind of using a fingernail to match it up. It's a little bit long, so I'm just kind of creasing it here, and this is where I'm going to cut to trim. Ultimately, the piece should be a little smaller to account for the foil. I think that should do it. There are some spaces in between, and that's normal. But yeah, the pieces match up, and so now I'm going to set this aside and I'm going to work on the second piece. I could have broken them out at the same time, but doing one at a time allows me to be a little more precise with the shape of each of those pieces. Breaking this one out would have also left a larger gap, and so I wanted to make sure that both of those pieces were the right size and not too big, because you don't want them to stand out once it's done by having too big or too small of pieces. So I'm doing the exact same thing with this piece, but since when I tapped the pieces, nothing came out, nothing broke loose. So now what I have to do is just melt off as much of this solder as possible. So I'm really working on the outside of this piece. Melting this solder off, as much of this solder, is going to loosen the piece. And I did put this one on fast forward because this one took a little while. I worked on this part for about 3 or 4 minutes or so, and it gets really, really super messy. So I'm adding flux, and and I propped it up this way too. I put some wedges behind it, coming in from the inside, because now I have to melt off that solder from the inside. So I've got the fume extractor right there, and as you can see, the flux is just kicking up all kinds of extra yuckiness. So this close-up is going to allow you to see what's happening as I continue to drag this iron all around. It is weakening the foil all around, but not so much that it's going to hurt anything. So you can see as I'm doing this, that piece moved a little. So now I can grab onto it and it comes out perfectly. One whole half of it. Now when I grab this other half, just pull gently, it comes out nicely as well. Nice. So now I've got something that I can make a new piece out of. So I can just put these two together. I'll remove the foil first, and then I'm going to just trace it. You could trace it directly onto glass, but I prefer to use paper first so that I can make adjustments. So I just use pencil on a piece of paper. Keep trying to match it up as best I can. Then I use regular scissors, just cut right on the line. And I usually try and match it up with the original again, just to see. And then you can place it where the spot is. Now I haven't removed the foil yet from this piece. That's what I'm doing now. This is exactly the same as what we did before. I've got it hanging off the edge. And I'm coming from the underside because it's a little easier when gravity is in your favor for the solder to drip out. There's a lot less foil on this one to remove, and it's coming off a whole lot easier. But you do see the mess that it's making. Clean off the tip of the iron as much as you can and continue to remove all the extra solder that's there. Now I'm cleaning it all up, and there's everything all removed. Now I can work on making new pieces. This is the part of the glass that I'm going to use for piece number 1, and I'm going to do the same for piece number 2. I'm using a paint marker to trace the pieces onto the glass. I cut, ground, and foiled them, and now they're ready to go in. To keep them in place, I'm going to use masking tape. We use a lot of masking tape in our classes. It helps to catch any solder that might drip through, and it just holds things in place really nicely. Just make sure there is absolutely no flux on the surrounding glass, otherwise nothing is going to stick. You're going to be fighting a losing battle. So I'm taping it on the inside first. And then on the outside of the shade, I'm going to place just a couple of pieces of masking tape to hold piece number 2 in place. So there it goes in. Nicely, good. And now I'm tacking it into place. When soldering lampshades, my preference is to start with the inside, just because I feel like it's a little easier then to correct any mistakes that may have happened or any run through when you're working on the outside last, but you do you. Now I'm going to just remove these pieces of tape and add a couple of extra tacks in there. Whoops. All right, now I'm removing that little drip there. Make sure to remove it from the foil before you pick it off, otherwise you rip the foil. Now I'm gonna solder the inside first, so I will tape up the back side. There are a lot of spaces in between pieces on domed lampshades, so I just want to make sure that the run through hits the tape. I think I missed a little spot in there, but it'll be okay. That's what that looks like. The solder work that I'm doing on this lampshade is going to match the rest of the lampshade. In other words, I'm not going to spend too much time on it, and it will look fine, especially after the patina. The goal is to have a beaded seam and for the edges of that solder to blend in with the existing solder. Cool it down with a sponge and also to remove any extra flux before you move to the other side. Here's the reveal. And now I have it propped in what I like to call a nest. It's a box that has crumpled up newspaper in there to kind of support it. I've got a fume extractor right above it. This I did put on fast forward because you all have soldered before. And now you're really going to see that my solder work is very quickly done. It will match the rest of the shade after the patina. You'll see that some of the adhesive is starting to break down, and so spending as little time soldering is helpful here. Now I'm going to work on the lower edge. I'm going to add a bead, and that is going to cover up the wire a little more. Clean off the iron, and I actually have this lampshade horizontal. Don't be fooled. It is horizontal, not diagonal. This is just the only way I could capture it on my camera. Once the wire is soldered in, we're done. We're ready for patina and waxing. So just make sure you remove all of the flux so that the chemicals don't intermingle. Pour a little bit into the cap, and now we take a little toothbrush. We've got some newspaper underneath because patina contains acid, so we just got to be a little extra careful. Gloves are always a good thing. Scrub it both inside and out, and now that solder job blends in perfectly. I like to wipe it all off instead of washing it. Now the inside. And now polishing wax. Put a little on the towel. We use Leva. And wax off. So we use the dry part of the towel to just buff it. If you want to go ahead and wax the rest of the lampshade to freshen it all up, that might be a good idea so that everything is equally shiny. Be sure to buff both the solder and the glass so that everything shines. And now we're done. Where's my panel? There it is. Lower right. Everything's beautiful.